All right. So thank you all for joining us on what is in California Pacific time an evening event, and we appreciate your interest in this event and our topic today, as well as the program that we'll talk about later on. My name is Kimia Habibi, and I'm the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid for Stanford Humanities Institute, as well as a few other programs. And I'll sort of MC parts of this event, but we have some other presenters as well. And unless you're having problems understanding or seeing something or technical problems, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions until we officially open a question and answer period towards the end of the event, as we might be able to answer your questions before you send them to us. So I'm going to pass things over to Taylor Hinkle, who will tell us a bit about our speaker.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time this evening or wherever you're joining us from to spend time. We're really glad that you're here. As Kimia already mentioned, my name is Taylor Henkel, and I will be speaking a little bit later as well. But to quickly introduce myself now, I'm the Associate Director of Residential Experience, and I'm responsible for the planning and execution of the Summer Humanities Institute. And that ranges for many things from determining the field trips that you'll be on to hiring the staff who will help you build community in the program. So essentially, my job is to ensure that you're safe on campus and have a fun, enriching learning experience while you're here. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Dan Edelstein, the Faculty Director of SHI and the William H. Bonsall Professor of French. Professor Edelstein has served as Faculty Director since SHI's inception in 2012. He teaches the Revolutions course, which challenges students to think about the arc of revolutions spanning the past 4 centuries and concludes with discussions about contemporary revolutions in the Middle East. Professor Edelstein is a fierce advocate of the humanities and the value of a humanities education, which is exemplified in SHI through one-on-one office hours with Stanford faculty and graduate students and the submission of a final research paper. Over the next 30 minutes, Professor Edelstein will highlight the role humanities play in both a collegiate education and future successes in today's complex world. Challenging yourself to understand the past, question the present, and envision what is possible for the future can foster your personal growth and expand your understanding of the world. So if you're ready to learn how the study of humanities can broaden your intellectual horizons, this webinar is definitely for you. So please join me in welcoming Professor Edelstein and his talk, Think Beyond: Why Humanities Matter.
Thanks so much, Taylor. Thanks to all of you for coming. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm having a little canine difficulties here. But that should hopefully be sorted out. So yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you both about this program, but also I want to start by talking about the role of the humanities in higher education. And to do that, I actually want to take a step back and begin by talking about what is the purpose of higher education, especially in this country. Now, that's a question that most people answer pretty easily. They would say, well, it's obvious. The goal of going to college is to get a job or get a better job, get a job maybe in a specific area. Maybe it's to go on to get a professional degree. But we tend to think about college in this very vocational sense. And I don't mean vocational, I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I just mean that we think of it almost as a very instrumental, it's how we get from point A to point B, and point B is a profession, it's a vocation, it's a job. That's a very common way to think about college. Unfortunately, I think it's the wrong way to think about college. I think it's the wrong way to think about college in the United States. And the reason why I draw this distinction is that if you go to college in most European countries, most Asian countries, then actually the program that you would sign up for is intentionally vocational. So for instance, I went to college in Switzerland. And on day one, I had to declare my major. My major was French literature, but I was studying French literature because the state had decided that it needed to have professors who could teach this, mostly at the high school level. So it wasn't that the program was not designed so that people who love French literature could pursue it. Rather, it was really very much done just for this vocational purpose. Now, if we intended American degrees to be leading to jobs in this way, we'd be doing a really bad job at that. Because when you come to Stanford, when you go to most colleges in this country, you're doing all sorts of things that are not obviously related to a job. So I'll just use Stanford as an example. There's a language requirement. There's a writing requirement. We have what are called distribution requirements, meaning that we demand that every student take a class in or multiple classes in different areas. So if you come in with this very specific goal of, I want to be, say, a computer programmer, then you might say, well, why am I forced to do all these other things? Like, I just want to be a computer programmer. And here you are making me, learn French and take classes in ethics and history. That's not what I'm here for. But that's because we have unfortunately socially developed an idea of college that does not match the design of college in this country, especially. So what is the design of college? Where does it come from? It is premised, in fact, on the idea that college is a place for you to develop your broader skills and also to grow as an individual, to cultivate and enlarge the mind, and maybe even also to develop certain civic skills. This is all, for instance, in the founding grant of Stanford University. We talk about the purpose of the university not being solely to get a job, but to grow as an individual and become a citizen, become prepared to make decisions concerning the democracy. So this is a completely different way of thinking about liberal education. If you'll just excuse me 1 second, my canine problem has reappeared through another. So as I was saying, the purpose of a liberal education is premised on a different idea here. So what is that idea? I've explained it briefly, the cultivation and enlargement of the mind. And all of this also is related to the place of the humanities at the institution. So let me say a little bit about why the humanities matter so much for your everybody's college education. There are a number of ways in which thinking about liberal education is so crucial for your well-being. And the humanities, that's really the place, I think, where they play the biggest role. And I'm going to give you a few examples of this. So, for instance, I think a great rule of thumb when you are thinking about your college education is to ask someone around you, ask an adult who's been to college, who's maybe 10 to 20 years out of college, what do they actually remember about the classes that they took? I did this experiment recently with my own parents, who are both majored in biochemistry. They were very STEM, as we say today. But in fact, when they think back on their college education, it wasn't their organic chemistry classes, their biology classes that mattered to them. It was, in fact, a class for my mother, a class that she took on this Roman satirist Juvenal. That's really what stood out for her. For my dad, it was this English literature class that he took. And it was quite interesting because in both cases, these are classes that were not even part of their major, and yet that's what they retained. That's what really stood with them. And I think that that really captures how you might go about thinking of the role of the humanities, regardless of what you choose to major in. It is ultimately about, growing as an individual, and having something that you carry with you for the rest of your life. So I think this is the part of a college education. And I want to be clear, it's not the only part. A college education can also be very practical, but you're doing college wrong if you only focus on the practical. And I would add, I think that at 18, and also possibly your parents, sorry, parents, we don't always really know what is practical or not. We might have an idea, but we're not always correct on that. And I'm going to share some data from employers that point to the fact that a lot of these, these endless articles that you read about that talk about the highest grossing majors, et cetera, they, in many respects, they kind of miss the point of what a college education is really for. So let me talk a little bit more clearly now about the ways in which the humanities can be so beneficial to you, again, no matter what your major is. I think that one way to think about this is to divide the humanities sort of into different kinds of buckets. So one of these buckets would be classes that allow you to explore the ways in which humans have always pursued meaning and purpose. I mean, it's one of the fundamental things that makes us human, is that we are not satisfied simply by eating well and sleeping well and being safe. We crave something else. We crave purpose. Your generation, actually, on surveys, is particularly driven by purpose and a desire for meaning. Now, it's not always obvious where to find that and how to be fulfilled in this sort of more existential sense. But this is a question that humans have been wrestling with, really, as far back as we have any records of. And so one place to start is by simply taking courses on ways in which humans in the past, from multiple traditions, have grappled with this question. So this might mean taking classes. It could be in literature, could be taking a class, on epic poems or on 19th century novels. These are always works of literature, often portraying individuals who are grappling with these questions. But it could also be religious studies, philosophy, even history can be a great place to explore this question. Obviously, philosophy is in many respects in the Western tradition driven by this question of what is the good life, what is the good, what is the beautiful, and the multiple philosophical traditions that have sprung up ever since Greek antiquity, all offer different answers to these questions. So studying those can be a great place to start on your own voyage for finding meaning and purpose. Now, another bucket of classes that the humanities really capture and are particularly well designed to give you are everything that has to do with aesthetic enjoyment, beauty. I think we underplay the importance of beauty in our lives. I tell my Stanford students that all you have to do is drive down El Camino Real and realize that living in a world without beauty does something to your soul. It does something to your general state of well-being. And one of the great things about a college education is that it kind of unlocks all of these different worlds of beauty. Some of you might already enjoy classical music. Some of you might find that classical music just doesn't really make sense. And that's normal because a lot of artistic forms, to really appreciate them, you need an introduction. You need someone to explain what's going on. How does a sonata work? what are the different parts of a symphony? The same holds for reading poetry. You know, it's not obvious how to read a poem if you haven't been trained into the way a sonnet works or other poetic forms. One of the most popular classes at Stanford right now is called Art History 1B, and it really teaches students how to look at paintings. What are you supposed to look at when you're walking through one of these big, European museums, or even if you're just at, SF MoMA? How do we look at paintings? And again, this might seem trivial. It might seem like a luxury. On the other hand, who wants to live in a world of just, blank walls and elevator jingles? Beauty is something that we crave also as humans. We want to be surrounded by beautiful things. And the great thing about studying this at the university level is that not only are you exposed in a particular class to wonderful paintings and multiple cultural traditions, or to great works of literature, great pieces of music, you get to appreciate and experience those, but by learning the skills for how to appreciate and enjoy those, you're also then able to spend the rest of your life discovering new aesthetic pleasures, new novels, going to new museums, hearing new pieces of music. And this constant process of enriching yourself, builds your own imaginary and mental library. You become a collector, but not necessarily a material collector. You just collect, beautiful things that you then keep within you and are always there at a time of need, or just a time when you want to withdraw within yourself and, be in a slightly more meditative place. So these are not trivial. These are actually essential, I would say. The former president of Barnard College, Judith Shapiro, has a wonderful line. She says that the goal of college is to make the inside of your head an interesting place to spend the rest of your life. I think that's a great way to think about this kind of acquisition, the collecting of beautiful things, and also the collecting of knowledge ultimately. Now, there's a third bucket of courses or of topics in the humanities that I would say are really designed to make us a little less provincial. Now, the maybe a more flattering way of saying that is to make us a bit more cosmopolitan. But I do think that everybody comes to college a little provincial. We've only had a certain set of experiences. Most college students have kind of grown up in one or two places, maybe one or two cultures, but even that, you've only experienced the people around you. And one of the great things about going to college is that not only can you learn about the ways and the cultures of so many different peoples around the world, but you can also learn about the ways of thinking of people from all periods of history. I think that's one of the really trippy things about studying the humanities, is just realizing that all these things that we take for granted, like it's always been this way, this is normal, it's not, historically speaking, normal. Almost everything we do today would have seemed very abnormal, even just 40 years ago, let alone 400 or 4,000 years ago. And there's something to that knowledge, to recognizing how denaturalizing to some degree everything that we believe, that I think makes us wiser. It allows us to recognize that things can change, nothing is forever, things are unstable, and then learning that things haven't always been the same also teaches us, well, why is it that they change, and how do they change? So a great place to study this is through history, of course. But also, again, literature is a great place. And if you have the opportunity at some point, I think that the sort of quintessence of a college education, of a liberal education, is studying abroad. Go to a culture that you are unfamiliar with, that you've maybe visited, but you don't know personally. It's not part of your heritage, and just live with people on a day-to-day basis. And that's the best way to realize how, how abnormal we all are, right? That there is no one set of traits, one set of behaviors that are shared by everyone. that we are all very idiosyncratic in this way, and that it's a very important part of an education, as all of our overseas language directors will attest. Um, and then finally, I want to bring this back to the practical question, which is, I think that a lot of students, they'll hear me give my spiel and they'll say, well, that's nice. Like maybe that's for some students, but not for me. I've got a lot writing. I'm going to college. People expect things of me. It's a just scary economic world out there. I just have to make sure that I'm job ready on day one. Well, those are totally understandable, absolutely reasonable concerns to have. Where I would challenge students who say this to me is like, well, how do you know what it means to be ready on day one? Like, what are you basing that knowledge on? And the reason I say that is that I look at a lot of surveys that various societies do of employers, and what employers actually tell us they want is very different than what I think students say they need to have. And I'll just give you a few examples. Employers say, generally speaking, we don't really care about major. Really, what we want to see are graduates who have great critical thinking skills, who are really good communicators, and who know how to work well with others. Now, those are not really skills that you're going to get by sitting in a bunch of really large intro lecture halls. Many of these skills actually are best cultivated in the kind of smaller seminar style discussions that typically are what you would find in humanities departments. You learn how to communicate. You're talking about, let's say it's the Iliad, and different people are giving their opinions. And even if it's talking about the Iliad, which probably is not what you're going to be doing in board meetings later on in life, you're still learning how to listen to somebody, how you're listening to a different point of view. You're then learning how to express your own thoughts in a constructive way, rather than saying, well, no, that's wrong and I'm right and this is why. And then, probably at some point you'll be asked to write up your thoughts, drawing in on research by other scholars. And while all of that might seem, worlds away from anything practical you might ever need to do, actually it's not. Any kind of research you might do, whether it's for a company or whether it's just pure R&D, involves precisely these kinds of skills, looking at multiple sources, trying to synthesize where people agree, identifying where they disagree, figuring out maybe what some of the problems are with some of your sources. These are super important and incredibly useful skills that you can develop. I mentioned earlier on that my father's a scientist. He had a career as an academic scientist, and he would always say, the difference between getting your scientific article published in Nature, which is the highest flagship journal of all scientific fields, versus some smaller journal with a much lower circulation, is not so much whether your science is better, like whether your results are more interesting. It's whether you have found a way to communicate your results better by being a better writer. So really working hard on writing is a skill that you will use in every single part of your life. Many of my colleagues here at Stanford are science professors or in the medical school. And let me tell you, they spend about 30% of their time writing grant applications. And when you're doing that, you're basically trying to tell a story. Like, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and here's how I'm going to try to find something out about it. That is a very literary skill. Obviously, you need to know a lot about the science. You have to be well versed in your field. But at the end of the day, you need to know how to string sentences together in a way that's compelling for your reader. And that is actually a rhetorical, a humanistic skill that you need to develop. The other one that I will point out is languages. I was talking with an alum recently who told me this great story. He said, he was from an underrepresented minority from a really a low-income background. He got into Stanford, and he was a math major, and his family was really happy. You know, math majors, like, surely you can get a lucrative job as a math major. And then he studied abroad, exactly as I was urging you to, and he went to Florence, and he fell in love with Florence and with Italian. He just, everything about being in Italy, about the ways Italians have, la lingua italiana è tantissima bella. This convinced him to switch his major. So of course his family was horrified. You know, he had this nice good major you can tell your friends and neighbors about. Suddenly he's majoring in Italian. Like, what are we gonna, how are we gonna tell our community that? But he loved it. He then did go on to law school and became a lawyer, and he was working fine. He had a good paying job as a lawyer, and one day gets a phone call from a friend, another lawyer who's at a big firm that I probably shouldn't name. And the lawyer friend said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to head up our European operations. We're expanding into Europe. I seem to remember that you speak Italian." And because of this, he ended up getting this incredible job that actually brought him a lot of money for a huge corporation that you've all heard of, as the head of their European legal team. And the only qualification he had, beyond having a law degree, of course, but there's lots of lawyers out there, was that he spoke Italian and knew Italian culture really well. So all of this to say, none of us really know what it is that's going to be useful in life, what's going to help you in your careers. And I would add, I think it's very short-sighted to spend 4 years of college, sometimes at great cost, only to try to land your first job. You should be thinking about your life and about all the opportunities that are going to come up later on in life that you can't be predicting now. Some of them might be these kind of chance things that happen, like in the story I was telling of my alum, but also it could be that, you're really good at your first job, and then, they want to promote you to a more managerial position. Do you have the skills for that? Have you thought about what does it mean to be not just really good at, doing this one thing, but at leading a team? Again, that's not really a skill that you learn in the lab or in a big, organic chemistry class. These kinds of human skills are going to be really important for you as you go through life. So I'll end with just one interesting finding that came out in a recent AAC&U survey. Says that 86% of employers now say that learning to engage across difference is essential preparation for the workforce. So I think what they're finding more and more is that many graduates just don't know how to talk to people who disagree with them, who have different, and it's not necessarily political. It could just be like, we have different ideas on how to resolve this problem, or we have different approaches to this, this sales strategy that we're coming up with. And again, this crucial skill, which is essential, for your future well-being, it's also essential, goes without saying, for our democracy. Being able to listen to people you disagree with, hear them out, figure out why they feel the way they do about something, and maybe, not convincing them that they're wrong and that you're right, but at least understanding them. That is such an important skill. And I think it really encapsulates why what we're trying to do in terms of, I always shock my students by saying that this is about your soul. This is really about the essence of being a human, both in terms of your individual well-being, but also, your role as a citizen, as a voting and as a member of your community. Those are also crucial skills, just as you will go through your career or possibly your multiple careers. So that's my general pitch for why the humanities are central to all college educations. Even if your goal isn't to major in the humanities. Of course, majoring in the humanities is great because you get all of these skills in droves and more. And I know that speaking to majors from Stanford, our humanities majors do just fine, and often end up having the more interesting jobs. This is more anecdotal, but that's what they report back to me. So I will probably stop there for my little sermon, but I'm happy to talk more later about the program, the Humanities Institute itself, when we get to that part of the show.
Thank you for that. Based on the chat, it looks like it gave everyone some food for thought or reaffirmed some thoughts they already had. And as a former humanities major myself, I certainly agree with you on all points. So where we're going to transition at this point in the event is to talk about a very specific program. So we're moving from humanities in general and college education and what that might mean in the future to a specific program offered at Stanford University called the Stanford Summer Humanities Institute. And a few of us will give you some information about the program, about who can apply for the program and what is necessary to apply for it. And then we will have questions and answers at the end of all of that. So I will segue into those slides. So the program is a residential program, so it brings together students from all kinds of different backgrounds and places, and fostering these ideas of global citizens and bringing in global perspectives into this program. So the program is 3 weeks in length for each student who might attend. We run 2 3-week sessions, so a student would attend one or the other if they're admitted. And it is residential, which means it's in the dorms on Stanford's campus, and we'll talk a bit more about residential life in a little bit. But the goal is that you're able to study the humanities at a college level, to explore it in a deep fashion, investigate philosophical questions. There's research components to it as well for students to work on towards the end of their course. Being alongside other students who have this curiosity about the humanities or particularly about the course topic that they've decided to attend, and other kinds of academic exploration within those topics as well. So Professor Edelstein, if you want to talk about the courses, at least for last year, we do not yet have the course list posted for 2025, so that's coming soon.
Yeah, so I think what I'll say is that all of the classes that we offer through the Summer Humanities Institute are modified versions of courses that my colleagues teach at Stanford. So they're real college courses. And the reason that we really insist on this is that we want high school students to realize that the way you study history or literature or philosophy in college is often very different from how you might study it in high school. We hear this all the time from our students, like, wow, like in high school, you know, in APUSH, I'm just made to learn all these dates and remember all these names, and it's really boring. And one of my colleagues, Carolyn Winterer, who teaches the American Enlightenment class, she says, yeah, you know, my classes are kind of like turning APUSH inside out. Like, I don't really care if you remember exactly what year the Battle of Lexington and Concord was. Oh, you should probably know that one. But, you know, that's really not the point of a college class in history. It's not about how much information can you retain. It's really about, can you identify what do we still not fully understand? What are the parts of history that are still, you know, being worked out or might be contested by historians? And could you then learn, like, what would it mean to formulate your own hypothesis about something, do the research, and write it up? And that is part of these classes as well. So the way it works is that you would enroll in one of these classes. Some of them do some stuff together. So in Revolutions and the American Enlightenment, we have a couple joint sessions, and the Greeks, actually no, the Romans join us as well on one day. But basically, you're in one of these classes. In the morning, you get a lecture and you spend some Q&A time with the professor. And then in the afternoon, you have a discussion section with a discussion leader, or usually a graduate student. And then that afternoon you have some downtime, but you also have to prepare for the next day where, you're back in it. So you do that for about 2 weeks. And Taylor makes sure that you also have fun and stay safe during this period. But then for the last part of the program, you are writing your own 10-page research paper. And this can be kind of daunting for some students. We scaffold it really well. We've been doing this for 12 years, so we sort of figured it out. We don't just sort of drop you off in the deep end and say, okay, come back when you have 10 pages. We've really found a good way to help our students make it to the finish line, and I would say 99% of them do. So it's a really fulfilling experience for students to not only get this sort of like intense deep dive into a topic, but then also to learn how to contribute, how to be a scholar yourself. And some of these papers that get written in these classes end up being published. Quite a few have been published by the Concord Review, which is the journal for high school history projects. So as you can see, all of the classes are also taught by Stanford professors. I'm pretty sure actually all of them are taught by tenured Stanford professors. So this isn't just a program where you sign up, there's Stanford on the title and you're on the campus, but we just hire people off the street to teach these classes. This is very much a way of getting a sense of what is it like to study at Stanford, because you're also in the Stanford dorm, and you're eating in our dining halls, and you're meeting with the faculty, the Stanford professors. And I see there, I'm not going to go through all the questions, but because I just popped up and it's what I was going to say anyway. Yes, it is very academic. This is, if you are really if you enjoy nerding out on academic topics, I would say this is the program for you. And you will find that you are surrounded by other high school students who have the same, enjoyments. Now, there's also, as I said, there's lots of downtime. You get to go fountain hopping, which is a renowned Stanford experience. And Taylor and his great team have a whole set of fun activities, including field trips. So, it's not that we lock you in your rooms and don't let you out until you've read 500 pages every day. But there's a kind of fun academic intensity that I think also makes the faculty who teach these classes come back year after year, because it's really fun. I love teaching in SHI. And I love just being with a group of students where that's all you're doing for 3 weeks. When I teach students at Stanford, like I get them for a couple hours every week, but they're doing a ton of other things also. Whereas here, it's really everyone is in it and just focused on this one thing in a super intense way.
I'll go to the next slide so Taylor can tell us a bit more about day in the life and residential life on campus.
Hello again, and Professor Edelstein covered a lot of great topics that I'm also going to cover in the next 2 slides as well. But just to give you a sense of what your typical weekday might look like on campus while you're in SHI. So as Professor Edelstein mentioned already, you're spending your morning essentially in class, and then you're spending the early part of your afternoon also in class as well. And so this is a really great opportunity for you to connect with your peers, and then the discussion leader section, particularly in the afternoon, in a smaller group. So your class is split in half. And so you'll be in one half of the section with the discussion leader. And so you can have some of those smaller group conversations. You can really kind of spend time thinking about what you learned in the morning, asking any questions, asking any clarifying questions. And so as you kind of see, we have the first part of the day really academically focused. And then the second part of the day in the mid-afternoon onward, is a little bit more co-curricular in nature. So each afternoon and evening will look a little bit different depending on the day, but it could consist of a variety of different things. So maybe it's study time or paper writing. So maybe you have some reading to do, or once the research papers become closer to being due, you'll probably be spending a lot of your free time working on those papers. There may be office hour meetings, and so that's something that's really unique about our program. You have one office hour meeting with your faculty member, and then you have at least one office hour meeting with your discussion leader as well. So you could talk about your interest in humanities, you can talk about your paper, you can get advice, whatever you kind of want to do at that time. There's an opportunity to have that one-on-one engagement, which is really unique and mirrors what you would experience in a collegiate setting. We may have an activity or workshop. So for example, you may meet with Stanford undergraduate admissions. We may have some other folks on campus come in and talk to you, share some of the work that they're doing, just to give you a sense of what it's like to live the college experience. And then some days it may just be free time or downtime. Maybe you want to rest. Maybe you just want to socialize in the residence hall with your friends, or maybe you want to check out and explore campus with your friends. And so there's the opportunity to do that as well. And then we'll kind of wrap up each night. So we kind of end the evening with a house meeting that's required. And that's a chance for you to get to know your peers a little bit better. Maybe sometimes you'll do activities. Sometimes it'll just be our residential staff giving you important updates. So maybe the night before a field trip, for example, we're going over the schedule for the next day. And again, as I mentioned before, attendance is required for that. And then we set lights out between 10:45 and 11 every night. And that's when you're expected to be in your room and winding down for the evening. So if you're still up reading, or maybe you're talking to your roommate, that's okay. But at that point, we ask you not to be in the common areas or socializing in big groups, because we want everyone to get rest and be prepared and ready and energized for the next day. Kimia, would you like to go to the next slide? Perfect. So Professor Edelstein has talked about this a little bit already too, but your experience on campus is really important to us. As we already talked about a little bit, your safety is our #1 priority, but what's also equally important to us is that you're having a really meaningful time here. We want you to connect with your peers. We want you to really learn about yourself and learn about others too. And so we really do our best to set up an environment where you can do that both inside and outside of the classroom. And so here's some things that we do to kind of help with that. We have an off-campus field trip. It varies from year to year. It may be up in San Francisco. It may be somewhere else in the Bay Area. So we'll if you're admitted to the program, we'll be sending more information about that. We want to make sure that you can go to the gym if you'd like to, and everyone has library access. So that's important too, to do research and just also kind of see the environment and the resources that the library has to offer. We do optional trips either on campus or just off campus. So maybe going to the farmer's market, going on hikes. We have different workshops, as I already mentioned. We have different community building activities, so you can get to know your peers better over the course of the time. We want you to really get to know one another, build community, really create those lasting relationships. And then also, as we talked about, free time to explore, and then living with a roommate is important too. So many of you would have a roommate, and we think that's important for you to get to have that college experience, but also learn how to live with and communicate with another person. And one other thing that I wanted to add here that's important, as Professor Edelstein mentioned, we have a lot of support in place. One of the support mechanisms we have in place is our residential staff. And so something that's really unique about our staff is that they all have humanities experience. They either have a humanities, social science, or writing experience. And so they've taken some of the classes that you also will be taking, or they have familiarity with some of the subjects that you're learning. And so that gives them the opportunity to provide this really unique mentorship for you. So you have your faculty members and your discussion leaders who are providing that academic instruction and support. But then when you're in the residence hall and maybe you're trying to figure out how you should word your conclusion for your research paper, maybe you're trying to figure out, okay, I have all this reading to do tonight. Like, how can I do this? I feel like that's a lot more than what I'm used to. Your residential staff can be there to mentor you and support you and really kind of like share a relatable experience with you. So we're really excited about that, because we intentionally hire staff who have a humanities, social science, or writing background, so they can provide that level of support for you. Okay, and then Kimia, I will go ahead and pass it back to you.
Thank you. Since I saw some questions coming in about it, we don't have a slide with a list of all the admissions requirements, but I am just going to summarize. So this program is for rising juniors and rising seniors in the US system. So in other education systems, that's those last 2 years of what's considered high school education before university. So the applications will open in mid-December this year. And the application deadline will be very early in February next year, and that will be for a program in summer 2025. So application materials do include things like essays and some extra writing that we ask you to submit. We do ask for recommendation letters, and a recommendation that should be relevant to the humanities as a field. So a recommendation from a math instructor is not going to fulfill that particular request. And standardized testing is not a requirement in this application process. And I see some of the staff members are starting to answer some of the questions that came in. So we can open it up to further questions. And then to the question about whether you can be a rising 10th grader or younger, no, come back to us when you're approximately a rising junior. And the number of applicants changes every year. It is a competitive program to be accepted into. So if you're looking for a summer program, don't just apply to this one. That's good advice in any setting, is not to put all of your options into just one place. English teacher recommendations are acceptable. The admission requirements are pretty similar to a college application, another summer program. There shouldn't be anything too surprising in there. You will tell us in the application which courses you're most interested in taking, and as of now, each course is only offered during one set of dates. So you can only select courses during dates during which you say in the application you can attend. And as a reminder, it's in person on Stanford University's campus. You cannot come late, leave early. So if you say you're available for certain dates, that means you will show up and leave on the dates that are shared. And the questions about teachers and recommendations are being answered. It doesn't matter how early or late you submit an application. There's no rolling acceptance process. All of the decisions will be sent out at the same time. We will operate a wait list. So while we wait to hear whether students are accepting the spaces that we offer, we will have a wait list to reach out to in case there are some spaces left. There's more information about the attendance policy on the website, but basically the policy is that you can only really miss class or miss time for something really essential or important or illness or something like that. Professor Edelstein mentioned that there's some cross components between some of the courses, since the students are only attending one course. What other topics might they be exposed to outside of that course is one of the questions.
Yeah, so it does vary, and sometimes like some of the courses also, for instance, require film viewings, and so those are usually done in the evening in the at the resident, and they're usually open to students from all classes. So that would be one way. And we have a couple events where we're all together. So I feel like there's a kind of there's a lot of mixing that happens sort of somewhat naturally and then somewhat just through these other events that we do.
Mhm. And students are sharing dorm space with the students who are attending the other courses during that session as well. So some socialization discussion might also expose you to some of what they're learning in their course as well. Kaya's question is one that kind of calls back to the beginning topic. What would be the benefits of doing a program like this and how it might fulfill you in the future and how it might influence you? I can extrapolate, but maybe you want to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key things to point out there are that, I mean, many of our students just think this was an incredible experience, you know, that they might have liked the humanities before, but just having this chance to really experience what it means to study the humanities at the college level, to be surrounded by, you know, just a set of other people who really are excited by this material, which I gather is not always the case in high school. That's really special. And then, you know, you get all these other parts of it, being on Stanford campus, living in a dorm. You get this kind of little foreshadowing, as it were, of college life. And then, you know, hopefully it encourages and inspires students to go on and, you know, pursue the humanities in a more committed way. I've had many students do SHI, and then the ones who I know best then come to Stanford and, you know, study the humanities, and they often credit SHI with sort of launching them on that voyage.
Yeah, I would say an experience like this might expose a student to something different or different aspects of something that maybe even they thought they already knew about, and can change your thought process or your trajectory in terms of what you think you might do. And changing is a good thing during these important growth years of young adulthood. So it's all right to find new influences and allow them to move you on to a different path. I've seen questions come up about financial aid. So there is financial aid, need-based financial aid for both international and domestic students for the tuition cost of the program, but not for the transportation cost of getting you to Stanford and from Stanford. But it would cover anything field trip wise or anything that's taking place during the program. And there was a question about how much the tuition is earlier, and I don't think we've officially released the tuition. Yeah, it just came up again. Officially released the tuition for next year yet, but the tuition that's shown on our website, it should be similar. Taylor, there's a question about roommate pairings. Are they random, or do you fill out a survey and get paired more intentionally?
That's a really great question. Yes, so on your application, you will answer a few questions about your roommate preferences. So about how you intend to use the room. Do you like to study? Do you like to socialize? Do you like to get up early? Do you like to go to bed late? Do you like a clean room? Does it not really matter how clean your room is? Do you like the space to be quiet or not quiet? And then basically from there, we'll take your preferences and we'll match you with people who answer similarly. So we want you to definitely have that learning experience and meet people in different courses, meet people from different places than maybe where you are living. So maybe a different state or a different country. But also in addition to that, we also want to do our best to make sure we're matching you with somebody whose preferences are similar. So you both are going to bed around the same time or waking up around the same time.
So I saw a question about sort of, do you like, are there any prerequisites you need to have studied the humanities in the past? I mean, I think that I wouldn't say that this is a program for students who want to discover the humanities for the first time. If you've never, really studied literature, history, philosophy at all, and think that this, I just want to like see what that's like. This might be a little bit too high a level, just because many of our students are coming because they're already quite passionate about these topics, or at least about the general subjects. I mean, few of them are specialists by any means, but they often, know already that they're very excited about it. So the more dedicated humanists.
Yeah, I would say the sort of intensity of the program and the amount of writing that you need to do by the end would lend themselves to, if you haven't done a humanities or social science type class that has pushed you to do some research, analysis, and writing, this would probably be too much of a challenge for it to be a positive experience. As far as to Lorena's question, the application definitely does ask for your activities and passions, and we want you to explain more. Don't just say, I like literature. We want more detail than that. And in addition to your transcripts, your academic record, we use that to kind of glean where have your interests lied and how much you've explored any particular thing. We haven't posted the courses for 2025 yet. We will, so the application and the course listings and all the sort of formal information will post in mid-December. So if you're not already on our mailing list, that is a good place to be to hear about it as soon as it opens. And we are right at 6 o'clock. So I'm going to pause us there. But if you have more questions, let me click ahead to one more slide. We do have an email address where you can ask us questions. We're happy to answer them, and explore the website too. We answer a lot of questions there, even if the 2025 information isn't there yet. And thank you to Professor Edelstein and to Taylor Henkel for answering these questions and being with us this evening. And thanks to all of our attendees.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for coming.